Welcome back to Next Wave Conversations, brought to you by the MakeGPT Group. My name is Chris Lukinenko, and as usual, I'm your host. Today, we're delighted to have Dave King with us, a true pioneer at the intersection of technology and creativity. Dave is the founder and CEO of MakeGPT, the makers of groundbreaking AI technologies who are transforming how organisations operate, innovate, and do business. In this episode, we'll explore how Dave's background in psychology and design has shaped his approach to technology, particularly generative AI. We'll discuss his insights on leading cutting-edge projects that merge human creativity with machine intelligence, fostering innovation across various sectors. So join us as Dave shares his journey from academia to the forefront of AI development and how he envisions the future of AI in enhancing creative industries. Well done, ChatGPT, on that introduction from your LinkedIn profile. Welcome aboard, mate.
Thanks, Chris. Great to be here.
Did I get it all right?
Yeah, that sounds fantastic.
Okay. Mate, speaking of LinkedIn and your profile, you have quite the loaded resume, don't you, mate? I mean, startups, digital strategy, AI consulting, and psychology. So where do we begin with this chat?
Well, I studied psychology. I was never a practicing psychologist. Okay. That's what I did at university, and I think I was super interested in the human condition back there, and maybe that was the through line to thinking about AI later on, especially large language models. But I studied psychology at Monash, and my first job was as a course advisor. So people would come in and make appointments to sort of get some counselling and get some help, and then I realised I wasn't very altruistic, and the dean of arts at Monash kind of pulled me out and said, "You know how to use computers, don't you?" This is 1992. I said, "Yeah, I do." And she said, "Can you make us a website?" And I never looked back.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's funny how you have those sliding doors moments in life where something as simple as a conversation can change your entire direction. I love it.
Yeah, it was an incredible time. My girlfriend at the time had a dial-up internet account, the first person.
Bing boom, bing boom.
Yeah, and no graphical browser, just like a text browser. And I remember sort of using it, and she wasn't using it at all, but I remember using it and saying, "This is incredible. It's like telepresence. I can be in another place, dial into servers at Harvard and Stanford and look through files and chat and bulletin boards and all that kind of thing." So the internet for me was initially an incredible kind of exploratory, liberating experience in the early 90s.
I similar early 90s, I would have been in year 12 at college, and my one sole thing I used for the internet for was on Monday mornings to check the NFL scores coming from America across the wire. I just remember going in there having to type all these sorts of commands and getting the listings get linked up, and then to get the green screen type scores in. I thought that was the best thing ever.
You had to work for it, but when it worked,
it was great. It was great. It's interesting that you say psychology sort of, you've used that in coming into this space. How so?
I think, literally undergrad psychology is not an in-depth look at psychology by any means, but I think you just learn the basics. You learn about how we process things, even from perception and the eye and the brain, and which parts of the brain kind of help us understand the world around us. And I think now when we talk about AI and we think about, are large language models creative or really intelligent, or can they reason, or when is general intelligence coming? I think back to those psychology days, and I think about sort of sensory perception and how our senses as humans play a big part in us helping understand the world. So whether that's recalling taste or touch, or evoking nostalgia from hearing something, those are things that AI can mimic but can't really actually facilitate in a sort of general sense.
Yeah, my son's second year psychology now, and I'm sure our conversations have changed in the last 18 months, where he's analysing what my wife and I are saying back to him when we're having arguments and all that sort of thing. I just sense it's different now.
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
What is it about generative AI that gets you excited?
I think I was first drawn to it, as you kind of said in your intro, from a sort of creative and critical thinking perspective.
Yep.
So it was 2016, 2017 where I fell in love with it, and I was thinking, at that stage, I was a partner in an advertising agency, the Royals, and I looked around, and in advertising, there's a pretty interesting paradigm, which is, since the 1950s basically, copywriters and art directors have worked together in tandem, and it's unusual to have such a formalised coupling in industry. And so I looked around and I thought, well, that's great. If you've got two people who can work together, that's fantastic. But I guess where AI seemed to be going even back then was that it could play a role as a thought partner for work. And I thought, well, everyone would prefer to have a human thought partner for work, a wingman, a coach, a mentor, those kind of things. But not everyone gets access to one. So for people who didn't have access to one, if they work remotely or they work in small business or work alone, how might this play out in that sense? And so that set us on our journey to really think about, like I say, critical thinking, creative thinking, and coming up with ideas, brainstorming with yourself in a way. And that was a really exciting proposition.
Did you have an epiphany moment in terms of like the sort of the consumer level of generative AI, Copilot, ChatGPT, whatever, where you thought, oh, this is pretty cool?
As a consumer of it?
Yeah.
I probably had a couple. I think the first one wasn't really as a consumer of AI, but just something I was looking into and watching. There was a time, it was 2016, April 2016, and Google had made a machine called AlphaGo, which was a machine that was designed to play the ancient Chinese game of Go. So just as years before it, IBM had made a chess-playing computer who'd beat Kasparov in the world champ in a match play series. AlphaGo was pitted against Lee Sedol, who was the 8 times world champion of Go. And this thing was a massive event in South Korea. It was huge. It was like a mainstream event. It was broadcast on national television. And it was really, and I was watching it from my home in Melbourne, and as it played out, I thought, this is a fascinating moment, not just for technology, but for culture and humanity. And I think a lot of people had that same kind of feeling when Kasparov lost to Deep Blue, the IBM machine. So at that time, it was when I sort of really got into AI, and I saw the way the machine played and how it adapted and eventually beat Lee Sedol. But later on, I think, more recently, like a lot of people, when we first saw the GPT models, sort of 2 and 3, there was a big step change. We'd been working with smaller language models for a few years. But the ability of GPT-3 and 3.5 to seemingly reason and seemingly understand started to open up a lot more use cases for us.
Yep.
And the responsiveness, it felt like magic. It felt like there was a Wizard of Oz kind of thing happening. There was someone behind the scenes kind of pulling the strings, and that it felt scripted. It was that different.
Oh, wow. And you just went, I'm there, I'm going.
Yeah, well, we were already working with natural language processing and natural language understanding applications,
Yep.
but these generalised models took it in a whole new direction. And obviously the ChatGPT moment created a lot of conversation, not just from what a large language model could do, but obviously the interface and the way it interacted with human users. And it created a lot of conversation in our industry around people sort of calling us and saying, how do we get involved? What should we be doing? What should we be thinking about?
And how did MakeGPT come about for you?
So MakeGPT was a formulation of a partnership around what the work we'd been doing at Move 37 and the ambition of Innovate GPT. So Innovate GPT is super well placed to help enterprise take advantage of all kinds of generative AI applications, and the partners they're working with are incredible. There's nothing like it in Australia. And so this partnership, MakeGPT, is really around adding development firepower to the group.
Yep.
So we're building a culture of AI engineering, which is a super important kind of capability in this day and age. And the Innovate GPT guys are out there having lots of conversations, doing incredible work, and we're really there to help them and support them from a development point of view.
What kind of, I mean, it's only very early in this journey, really, but what kind of solutions have you guys delivered already?
So for the last few years, we've been working on a range of, use cases. So things like research and planning tools, insights tools, content generation, customer service, chatbots, all of those kind of things. So mainly in language. We haven't really done much with imagery.
Yep.
We're starting to do some stuff with financial data. We're building an organisational brain. We are generating video scripts that are able to evaluate themselves and check in against the principles of the organisation. So really building out workflows and pipelines where certain things can be automated, certain things can be augmented by humans and machine, and certain things just remain a human part of the pipeline. And so this kind of notion of a workflow has really been the thing we've focused on. Into enterprise, got some super interesting projects in a range of those sort of spaces.
You come from the creative world. You said you ran an agency. How do you see generative AI, changing the creative industries over the next decade? You got some opinions around that?
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot, and a lot of people. The agency of the Royals, we started in 2008, and I guess in that time it was, if you were going to start an agency, you would start it with the full knowledge that the internet is now mainstream.
Yep.
Whereas the agencies that existed before that were kind of not internet native agencies. They had to migrate slowly into that space. So the timing for the Royals was quite good. These days, and I have a lot of conversations about this, if you started a creative agency today, it would be one that's augmented by AI from day dot.
Yep.
And so I feel like that you'd have more senior people who are very good at using tools, AI tools. It's potentially problematic for the junior people to get into that space now because, as we know, GPT-3 and 4 and obviously 5 do a lot of the intern-based tasks or the junior level tasks quite well. They do the average work quite well. So where the redistribution of labour and the tasks from within a certain job role go, it's still wait and see. I think the real advantage that in those, in advertising, creative industries, agencies, media agencies, those kind of things, are the back end things more so than the content generation. So, planning tools, creative exploration tools, coming up with insights, rapidly doing competitive analysis, understanding brand. There's obviously a lot going on in generating ads and imagery and text and things like that. But a lot of the work in those companies is it's the thoughtful exploration of work.
I tend to agree because, naturally everybody looks at the shiny sort of stuff that's out there, the Soras and all that sort of thing, and they're great and they're going to have their place and all that sort of thing. But I think, and we talk about this a lot on the podcast, that let the robots do what robots do best, and that is those more mundane tasks, the planning, the analysing, all that sort of thing. So I feel like while we're focusing on, movie studios being told not to use AI or whatever it is, that the other stuff I think is probably more important perhaps.
Yeah, I think it depends who the audience is. So I think if you're marketing to robots, that stuff will be fine. But we're not.
I love that.
We create things for fellow humans, and as soon as everyone's using Sora to create videos, then humans will level up. People who are interested, for whom creativity is part of their identity and part of the way they work and the way they think and live, they will level up. They always have, and they always do. So I think there's going to be a real kind of dismantling of certain, like I said, job roles, and some industries are going to have to shift focus. But as soon as there's a certain kind of vanilla aesthetic or a capability that's widespread, you just watch. There'll be eccentric, weird, wonderful, creative people that find new ways of doing things as they always do.
Oh yeah, I love that perspective because that's what happens everywhere. You get these creative people, whether it be in music or whatever. Think back to the 80s when DJs were sampling old soul records and turned out something completely different. They're pushing that edge of creativity. This is just another sort of element that someone will find a way to do something really cool with it.
Yeah, I think that's a good analogy. I think like in music, that industry has shifted dramatically, obviously, with the streaming services, but there are innovators out there pushing, new ways to interact with their fans, like new sampling techniques, complete different orchestration and instrumentalization, if that's a word.
We'll make it
techniques,
one. Yeah.
Producers like, Pharrell or Jay Dilla, these kind of guys have
Look at you dropping the modern musician names.
No, I'm a massive hip-hop fan.
Me too. But favourite hip-hop artist, just while we digress. Who is it?
Well, from a producer point of view, it's probably Jay Dilla. From a performer, maybe Busta Rhymes or Wu-Tang Clan.
Yeah, nice.
Most old stuff. I haven't really.
No, that's okay. Look, 90s hip hop is my wheelhouse. Absolutely.
Yeah, right. We might have to have another podcast.
We might need to. Did you get down to Mona and get to see the Wu-Tang?
No, I didn't. I joined the list.
I did too.
I think I joined with 1 minute before it went on sale, and I was 3 hours behind.
Yeah.
So, but no, I've seen the Wu-Tang and those. But regardless, they are actually quite renowned for being innovators.
Yeah.
All these kind of artists and performers and producers, regardless of what the technology and the consumption side is doing.
Yep.
Record labels have the changing role of record labels has been obviously a thing.
Yep.
You've got to tour, you've got to perform to make money, or you've got to sort of find other ways. So it's the same with AI. Like it's going to push people into uncertain, uncomfortable spaces. But creative people don't turn it off; they keep going.
Yeah, no, I love that, man. That's great. This obviously not your first rodeo. You've been around. You've got a wealth of experience in lots of different ways. What are you doing in terms of giving advice to young entrepreneurs in your circle of friends and influence about the intersection of tech and creativity?
Yeah, it's interesting. So when we started Move 37, I kind of did a little survey amongst the creative, I guess the creative directors, copywriters, art directors, those kind of people, about their propensity to, I guess, lean into generative AI or reject it.
Yep.
It wasn't that blunt. And generative AI in 2017 wasn't a thing like that. Didn't have that label, but I guess I was proposing this kind of creative thought partner. And it was quite interesting to kind of go, there's a mindset, and it wasn't necessarily generational. It was, I don't need that. I'm the professional. I'm kind of stuck in my ways. Again, they didn't say that. I interpreted that. I'm comfortable with the way things are.
Yeah.
And then there was another bunch of people who said, I'd give it a shot. It sounds super interesting. So it was more like a psychographic mindset than a generation. Like, it wasn't skewed towards older or younger.
Yep.
And so it was about leaning into things, trying things, experimenting. And I'm sure this has come up on your podcast before, that the people who are trying this and learning and finding the constraints and edges of all this kind of technology are getting ahead. And so I've said to my son, who's 21, you're probably not going to have to inherit the software that big software houses make. You're going to be able to make tools. Humans are fantastic at making tools. That's what differentiates us from other species. But now everyone's going to be a tool maker. So if you want to make music in a certain way, you can make a tool to make that music. If you want to create art or create imagery or write poems or whatever it is in a certain way, you can create tools that are for you. And so I think the big companies become tool makers for tool makers, which is super liberating. It's the democratisation of creativity, but it's also the personalisation of workflow. And the innovators of the last 100 years have always done that. They've tried different things in different ways and kind of adjusted the way they do things. And maybe the way you produce podcasts has evolved over time. And so I think, it's incredibly encouraging, and I'm optimistic. So when people ask me for advice, I say, try it, jump in, learn the constraints, persist. With chat and things like that, it's a session. It's not zero shot stuff. It's not just write a sentence and expect to get incredible value back. That's not how you talk to people. People who, don't react well to one sentence. If someone comes into your business and you have to teach them how to do something, you don't give them one sentence.
No,
you step them through it. And I think the other thing is, it's for executives. When we talk to, I guess, senior people in enterprise, it's very hard to understand from the outside in. A lot of technologies over my career, you can kind of describe or you can show with an image in a PowerPoint deck and explain it. This kind of stuff is so interactive, and I think the satisfaction and the magic or the disappointment or whatever comes from playing with it and understanding how you need to adjust. Yeah, if that makes sense.
I think that's the one piece of advice sort of we give around the group right now is just get in there and play with it.
Yeah.
Because it's really hard to understand, but you'll know that you're hooked, or you'll have that epiphany moment just by playing with it, and something will really tickle your fancy. You think, this is a thing.
That's it. And I think the other element is, like when we do workshops and talk to people in corporates, share your experience with your peers, because it's such a solitary experience at the moment. It won't always be. So browsing the web is a solitary experience. Using a ChatGPT or a Copilot or a Gemini in those chat interfaces is a very solitary experience. So you can look around your organisation, your open plan office and your cubicles, and there might be 30 people using it, but you wouldn't know.
Yep.
So we really encourage people. One of our clients has Sharing Prompt Friday. I don't think it's called that, but that's what they do. 11:50.
Doesn't sound very sexy.
Not a catchy name.
No.
Sharing Prompt Friday. 11:50 a.m. every Friday. They spend 10 minutes sharing all the stuff that they did during the week from a prompting perspective, and they borrow each other's prompts. And and obviously there are environments now which you have teams and you can share prompts and all those kind of things. So that's what we encourage as well, because when you tell someone how you tried to do something and you either were successful or not, chances are they've tried stuff and they've found out a better way.
Yeah.
And so that's the next kind of, I guess, phase of what we're saying of people working together in this space.
You're dealing with lots of enterprises, customers, all that sort of thing right now. What's your go-to move when you want to really impress a crowd around the boardroom table who maybe not so experienced with what ChatGPT or whatever can provide them?
What a great question. I think I do try and sort of tailor demonstrations and use cases to the audience.
Yep.
We've done things in tourism and we can sort of generate an itinerary on the fly and tailor it to an audience. We've done things in research where we can create a synthetic persona and test ideas against a persona rather than, don't imagine what someone in focus group, might say about an idea or a business solution. Yeah. We can create synthetic personas and run those ideas past people. That tends to impress. We did a really cool thing which I thought was a good use case for a company that does psychological testing for HR. So basically, we built something where you can upload a job description and upload the person's psychological test that they've done, and then it'll generate the questions you should ask for this person for an interview.
Yeah.
So it's super nuanced, and I thought, it's an example of where just because you run a business or you run a team doesn't mean you're great at interviewing people. So I think the opportunity for generative AI is to augment your skills in ways that maybe it's not your forte. Maybe you're not good at finance, maybe you're not good at marketing, maybe you're not good at operations.
Yep.
But so you can lean into those kind of elements and get really kind of niche assistive tools that help you get through that in an effective way.
Mate, I would have just I created a PowerPoint deck in 30 seconds based on a subject.
Oh, look, probably the consumer answer is generate a song using Suno, which
nice.
is a super fun thing for me. Not super sort of commercial as far as where I'd recommend people spend their time from an enterprise perspective, but it is somewhat magical, if not fraught with all the copyrighted material in there.
Of course, yeah. Yeah, no, I often talk about people's epiphany moments on the podcast, and sometimes they happen, when someone such as yourself comes to the boardroom table and shows them. Another one that we've been talking about lately is just having the ongoing conversation.
Yeah.
So back and forth with the bot, if you like, which is pretty cool too.
Yeah, I think the voice stuff that's coming out, just to reduce the friction of having that conversation, it'll feel uncomfortable at the start and it'll get better over time. I saw another demo this morning, and the pace of it is kind of uncomfortable because you're used to being in control of the cadence of a chat.
Oh, yeah.
But now it's kind of almost...
And the ability to interrupt.
Exactly.
See what I did there?
There you go, well done. And the one I saw this morning was interrupting too much. And so you kind of go, okay, I get what they're showing off for that. But I think once that gets fluent, which will be, in months, not years, that might feel like a much better way to brainstorm, ideate, to get ideas out of your head. So I think that interface layer will have a big impact on the way we use large language models and other technology behind it.
I find that fascinating. As a podcaster, knowing is something you learn, how to let a person tell their story, but also help them shape their story by interrupting or adding to their comments or getting them back on track when you see that they're sort of maybe going off a bit. Like, that's something I've learned over however many years I've been doing this sort of thing, but that's completely teachable for one of these models. Yeah,
it is. I think if you can transfer that knowledge, if you can explain that to someone, if you can explain that to your new intern or employee, and it's not one chat, it's not one meeting to explain someone's job. But if over time you iteratively explain that and it's nuanced and it's personalised, you're probably going to get a good instance of a podcast helper.
Yeah, nice. So let's dream big. Where's Move 37 MakeGPT headed? What do you want to do with this thing?
I think, for Move 37, we are an AI product studio for ambitious companies.
Yep.
And I guess
I really like...
I appreciate that.
That ambitious companies.
Well, it's kind of a filter. It's important. So this is nascent technology. This is not technology that you kind of go, we're a risk-averse company. We only do things that are super well played out.
Yeah.
It's not that yet. So it's for a slice of companies and people within, virtually every company that can see that they need to start building proofs of concept, building prototypes, distributing the knowledge internally. So most of our projects are in that kind of early stage of saying, by building and playing, experimenting and using internal data and getting people on board, this is the best way to level up an organisation. Like, we've all seen, I guess, innovation departments in organisations, and they sit in the corner and you can shift, they can be, 50%, 80% more innovative than the rest of the people, but it doesn't shift the organisation that well.
Yep.
So I think we're seeing some organisations sort of saying we're going to give access to a Copilot or a ChatGPT or a Llama 3 kind of skinned model internally, so that everyone can be prompting and trying things in a secure way. But on the side, we're also going to be building out prototypes and understand, from a workflow perspective, from a team perspective, what's possible. So I think, what excites me is getting people using this stuff and seeing the ideas that are in their head. So we really try to meet people halfway and say, we've been messing with this stuff for years, but your business inside, much better than we do, obviously. Yep. And so it can be a really great intersection to meet halfway and say, okay, now that we've worked on a stack of projects, we can understand what we might do for you. I think in these early days, and it still is early, we need to constantly show examples and use cases and demonstrations of things, because it's very hard for people to think from scratch what they might do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we kind of talk in pain points and gain points. So, the pain points are workflows or processes that are inefficient, costly, time-consuming, those kind of things. And it's quite easy for most people to talk through that because they can just look at the way they do things and describe it. Whereas gain points are things that generative AI has brought along that you couldn't do yesterday. And they're a little bit harder to unpack, but we can do that with sort of, further exploration and demonstrations.
Do you ever use the Voltron analogy?
No, what's the Voltron analogy?
Oh, no, that, just something's greater than some of its individual parts, and then that, by augmenting the little guy that's in the black line in the heart, he can do so much more. And I see that as, with these things, at some stage, we're all going to have a little army of co-pilots, or whatever you want to call them, minions, to help us.
Yeah, I'll be using the Voltron analogy tomorrow.
Yeah, just to augment our own abilities.
I think that's right. And I think Sam Altman from OpenAI recently said, soon we'll see the first single-person unicorn. A one-person billion-dollar company.
Yep.
And when you think about that and what's going to enable that to happen, it's AI agents, it's agentic workflows. It's literally having a fractional CMO, a fractional CFO, an ops person, inverted commas, milling around you at your bidding. And the interface between dealing with those people is more intuitive than dealing with a human version of that expert, because they will understand that you are not good at that skill set. That said, if you deal with a good accountant or a good financial advisor, a good lawyer, and they understand your level of expertise, that's a good interface as well. But so often, we're kind of, the knowledge is obscured from us because we don't really understand that domain, and we are, I guess, in their hands as far as how they'd like to commercialise our, consulting to us.
Yep.
But I think what's exciting from an entrepreneurial point of view or a small business point of view is you're going to be able to punch above your weight.
Yeah.
You're going to feel from the outside like a much more capable company, regardless of your low headcount. Headcount used to be a measure of how successful a company is or how well it's grown. It's not going to be the case.
No, I totally agree. Mate, we are working in an exciting space right now, aren't we?
It's fast moving.
That is the understatement of the day for me.
Exponentially fast moving.
Ridiculous. Dave, thanks so much for your time today. Really enjoyed having this chat. Like, you've just got a wealth of knowledge, and you guys are doing some great things. So thank you for your time.
Appreciate your time, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Cheers.